Our keynote speaker for this year's literary festival is Dr. Celeste McMaster. She's an associate professor at Charleston Southern University. Celeste has published poetry and fiction in the magazines and journals Short Story, the Dos Passos Review, MS Lexia, New Delta Review, Arkansas Review, and The Whale. And she is the winner of the 2016 Saturday Evening Post Great American Fiction Contest. She also won CSU's 2015 Excellence in Teaching Award. Celeste is not only a wonderful writer and teacher, she's a wonderful person, and I'm glad she's speaking at this year's festival.
Good morning. Thank you to Dr. Cersei and Dr. Terry for asking me to speak today. I wish I could be there with you in person to see my wonderful friends and colleagues. You're really blessed to have the two of them as your professors. I know you know that. I'd love to see all of you guys, all of you conference participants, but thank you for tuning in to listen. So the talk today is on the theme Poetry, Place, and Imagination, Thoughts During a Pandemic, February 2021. And I'm going to talk about three types of spaces. One is the natural imaginary space. The second is the political space. And the third is the personal space. For many of us, since March of last year, we've been largely staying in place, perhaps imagining places we'd rather be, or remembering cherished places we shared alone or with loved ones. Romantic poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge could relate. In This Lime Tree Bower, My Prison, Coleridge writes about being stuck under the lime tree bower, his prison, presumably because his wife, Sarah, scalded his foot with hot milk, one hopes accidentally. In his poem, he laments not being able to go for a walk with his wife and friends. However, after feeling sorry for himself for the majority of the poem, he has an epiphany. Sometimes 'tis well to be bereft of promised good, that we may lift the soul and contemplate with lively joy the joys we cannot share. You see, as he sat there with his sore foot, deprived of the actual journey, he had the opportunity to imagine his friends walking along the path. He thinks, now they're at this landmark, now they're here, now they're passing the walnut tree. Perhaps they're seeing swallows and bees. Coleridge becomes so full of love and beauty that he even ends up sending thoughts of blessings to his ambling comrades. In short, he uses his imagination as a way to free himself from what he'd previously considered a prison. John Keats, another romantic poet, also recognized the beauty, sometimes even the superiority, of imaginary places over real ones. He says in Ode on a Grecian Urn, heard melodies are sweet, those unheard are sweeter. Throughout, Keats speaks of the power art inspires, art being both the Grecian urn and the poem itself, both which generate contemplating mysteries of another time and place. William Wordsworth, too, understood well the importance of remembering and reimagining place, particularly his beloved haunts of nature. In The Prelude, or Growth of a Poet's Mind, his autobiographical work, Wordsworth recounts how the landscape of his youth fit him to be the kind of poet we now know as the nature poet. In one of his most well-known poems, Wordsworth recalls the landscape that restored his spirits and provided reservoirs of images that would later comfort him during times of trouble and anxiety. Here's the poem, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched a never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not be but gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon my inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. As a young girl growing up in a rural town in Arkansas, I, like these romantic poets, was a somewhat lonely child who took solace in worlds of my mind's own making. In Chinese Mulberry Tree, the first poem of mine that was published fittingly in the Arkansas Review, I write about one place of refuge, my favorite tree. And this is in parts. 1. Its arms reached out in front of my childhood brick home, scratching against my bedroom window, frightening me, the wolf of my nightmares returning to devour. But in the hot afternoon sun, I'd climb thick, sturdy branches, their crevices made for my small feet. I wouldn't know the name until years later, Chinese Mulberry Tree, exotic for a tree just off a dusty road in a small town in Arkansas. Neither would I know how Minerva loved the tree, symbol of wisdom, or how the leaves hosted silkworms. And much later, I'd learned the real name, Chinese fruitless mulberry tree, the tree where I first began to bud. 2. But I did know this, of all the trees in the world, this one was mine. Shells of locusts stuck to its bark, dried like the fried pork skins my brother and I would eat in Daddy's filthy, dusty brown pickup with the silver flatbed. I was queen. No evil hands or voices could reach me. Seated on a strong, thick branch, contemplating comings and goings, the buzz of flies, the zip of the bulldog's cable, while she ran back and forth, searching within her small perimeter for new reasons to growl and snap. Tearing apart a serrated leaf in the shape of a teardrop, smelling its bitter earthy tang, rubbing its milk white stickiness between my fingers, watching a solitary truck driving down the road, dust clouds trailing far behind. My nose clogged with dirt from the unpaved road, cow manure, the sick sweetness of Confederate jasmine and heavy rain to come. Up, away from cigarettes and burning metal of Daddy's welding, my hands still smelling of powdered milk and dog food. 3, just behind the tree, sand piles used for target practice. I hid among the bright green leaves, away from whizzing, stinging arrows, far away from other children. So I invented friends, blessed them with identities. Each branch a room in my house. I was married and my husband would be home any minute. Dinner would be ready, for we were entertaining. Our babies played together, using teethed leaves as rattles. 4, the last time I saw the tree, it belonged to new owners. Lightning had split its body down the middle. Branches splayed like a broken umbrella, weighed down by my girlhood. Though I grew up in Arkansas, I have lived in the Carolinas for over 20 years. While some of us must of necessity move for reasons of relationship, school, or employment, other writers are blessed to live, write, and serve in the same spot all or most of their lives. Wendell Berry of Henry County, Kentucky, is one such poet. Early in Berry's writing career, he became enamored with the work of poet William Carlos Williams, particularly of his use of one place as his subject matter. Although Williams was born and lived his life in Rutherford, New Jersey, a far cry from Berry's Kentucky homestead, Williams taught Berry to pay loving and critical attention to his own place. In his book, The Poetry of William Carlos Williams of Rutherford, Berry shares how he, at age 23, spent the summer of 1957 in an old farmhouse, reading and learning from Williams' work. Berry relates to Williams' famous "no ideas but in things," especially in terms of Berry's ecological values, the interconnectedness of all living and non-living things, and the ideas behind honoring and protecting them. In his poem, A Standing Ground, you can hear how he reverences his land. A standing ground. However just and anxious I have been, I will stop and step back from the crowd of those who may agree with what I say and be apart. There is no earthly promise of life or peace, but where the roots branch and weave their patient, silent passages in the dark. Uprooted, I've been furious without an aim. I am not bound for any public place, but for ground of my own, where I have planted vines and orchard trees, and in the heat of the day, climbed up into the healing shadow of the woods. Better than any argument is to rise at dawn and pick dew-wet berries in a cup. While Berry, whose mother, even in his infancy, read to him the Romantic poets, by the way, while he writes poems exclusively about his native land, Richard Hugo, in his book Triggering Town, doesn't agree that we should merely write what we know. Rather, Hugo believes that any place, anything in a place, anything we imagine about a place, may be the beginning of inspiration, or in his words, a triggering town, and start us off writing. His stance is that creativity flows more freely when we're not wedded to a place, when we don't know the intimate details of one's hometown and its history. 3, political space. Romantic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley believed in the revolutionary power of poetry to change the course of history. In Defense of Poetry, he boldly states, "Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world." For a while now, we've not much seen this in action. However, my hope is that poetry is making a political comeback. At the inauguration of President Joe Biden, for example, Amanda Gorman delivered her poem, The Hill We Climb, where she reminded us of our broken history and of the hard work we have ahead. We were also reminded of the importance of place as a shared inheritance when Jennifer Lopez knocked it out of the park when she sang, "This land is your land, this land is my land." When you love a place and its citizens, you recognize and address what's wrong in that place. You speak out against injustices around you. Poet laureate Joy Harjo, in the first section of her poem, Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings, instructs us. Recognize whose lands these are on which we stand. Ask the deer, turtle, and the crane. Make sure the spirits of these lands are respected and treated with goodwill. The land is a being who remembers everything. You will have to answer to your children and theirs. The red shimmer of remembering will compel you up the night to walk the perimeter of truth for understanding. As I brushed my hair over the hotel sink to get ready, I heard, by listening, we will understand who we are in this holy realm of words. Do not parade pleased with yourself. You must speak in the language of justice. Not only do we celebrate the loveliness of our country's places, but we also must call out its wrongs. Natasha Trethewey's poem Incident is one example of a poem that calls attention to racial injustice. The poem is a pantoum, by the way, a fixed form that includes a specific repeating pattern of lines. Trethewey's repetition conveys the trauma of living and remembering her family being threatened by the Ku Klux Klan. We tell the story every year how we peered from the windows, shades drawn. Though nothing really happened, the charred grass, now green again. We peered from the windows, shades drawn, at the cross trussed like a Christmas tree, the charred grass still green. Then we darkened our rooms, lit the hurricane lamps. At the cross, trussed like a Christmas tree, a few men gathered, white as angels in their gowns. We darkened our rooms and lit hurricane lamps, the wicks trembling in their fonts of oil. It seemed the angels had gathered, white men in their gowns. When they were done, they left quietly. No one came. The wicks trembled all night in their fonts of oil. By morning, the flames had all dimmed. When they were done, the men left quietly. No one came. Nothing really happened. By morning, all the flames had dimmed. We tell the story every year. Through her use of Christian and Christmas imagery, Trethewey points to the gruesome contrast of the message of a loving Savior. In my own poem, Interference, Atkinson County, Georgia, I explore a different kind of iniquity, that of animal cruelty. The poem was inspired by a news article from Atkinson County, Georgia, that profoundly bothered me. We all saw the manipulation of her body, the torque of torso and limbs. What power must have forced her into this position? Out of season, the policeman said. The doe's head, legs, neck, duct taped to the black metal folding chair, backed against the street sign, thin cigar placed in the side of her mouth, orange plastic glasses across her eye. What boys designed this harness of color, of vinyl and glue? It must have taken more than one of them to dress her just shot body in that fluorescent green vest. It must have taken more than two to bend her just shot body to the angle of their smiles. She looks nearly alive, eyes shut, trying and failing to break out. Ears splayed, head turned, resisting. I smell her fear, a flesh warm and wounded. Did she sniff the danger, the beer? Did she stomp to warn her babies, her mother eyes, gold bright and blind from cameras, flashlights? Lord, resurrect her body, cut loose the tape, let her haunt. May the boys smell beer and blood, feel the cold metal chair, the bullet in the chest. May they see the deers, then themselves, the deers, themselves, 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 the deer, themselves, themselves. In the chair, strapped in the chair, in their dreams, in their minds, every day, every night, for the rest of their lives and beyond. So the last section is personal. Some poets and critics go so far as to focus on the mind itself as a place. Robert Bly takes it one step further and writes about not only the place of the conscious mind, but of the unconscious dream state as well. In Bly's book, Leaping Poetry, he discusses associative poems by writers of various countries and cultures. Bly explains that leaping poems are surrealistic works in which writers leap from the conscious mind to the unconscious mind, and oftentimes back to the conscious mind. Sometimes they're just hops, they're small leaps. Oftentimes in such poems, there are worlds inside of objects, such as this short poem, very short poem, by Shinkichi Takahashi called Potato. Inside of one potato, there are mountains and rivers. If potato is place is more of a leap than you'd care to make today, you might start just thinking about the places in your own lives, those you know intimately and those you only imagine. We are moving through challenging times when the importance of staying grounded in place and in spirit is crucial. The poem Lost by David Wagner encourages us. Stand still. The trees ahead and bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes, listen, it answers. I have made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again saying, here. No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. A few years ago, I too wrote a poem about being grounded in place and its material details, about the connections between the divine and the earthly spaces in which we find ourselves. So I'll end with this poem. This is called How to See a Burning Bush. First, notice your surroundings. Beneath the cafe's rectangular pergola, rosemary commingles with ivy and dianthus. The only lights strung above bones of wood, the orange against the bruising sky, how each sip of espresso shocks you back to things unseen. Listen carefully. Here on the other side of the empty wrought iron chair in front of you, a Yupon holly bush begins to hum, as if someone turned it on from underneath. Little by little, fire spreads. Slow motion from one branch to the other, a divine finger tracing limbs in fiery paint. So close, but no burning smell, no smoke, just low crackling. Kick off sling-backed shoes. Use the other chair as footstool. Warm your feet's soles. Observe God put the world on pause. Customers freeze. Coffee cups to lips. Hands stuck and gestures directing thoughts, traffic. Wafts of smoke stop dead around each table. Take a deep breath. Stand barefoot. Walk onto cold concrete. The bush afire, not consumed. Listen for a holy voice, deep as a cave. in the humming. Recognize it slowly as your own. A hissing ember in your chest, rising up your throat, out your voice. Listen. Thank you for being here with me in this virtual place. I pray that you will have a good conference, that you'll listen to your heart and to God's still small voice in your writing, in your studies, and in whatever place or places the Lord has for you. Thank you so much.